Title: The Shadow in Sarah's Smile. Chapter 1: The Chill in the Air. The flickering porch light cast long, dancing shadows across the Peterson family home, a two-story colonial nestled in a quiet, tree-lined suburban street. Inside, a more insidious darkness was brewing. Mark Peterson, a man weathered by the relentless march of responsibility, felt a prickle of unease. He watched his wife Sarah across the dinner table. Her smile seemed off, too wide, too fixed. Her eyes held a glint that wasn't Sarah. It was like looking at a familiar landscape warped by a funhouse mirror. Their children, 10-year-old Emily and 7-year-old Thomas, were oblivious, bickering over mashed potatoes. But Mark couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly, irrevocably wrong. It had started subtly, small objects misplaced, whispers in the dead of night, a bone-chilling draft that clung to Sarah even on warm days. Sarah attributed it to stress from her demanding job as a nurse, but Mark knew better. The air around her crackled with a strange, unsettling energy. One evening, Mark awoke to a cold hand clamped over his mouth. Sarah was sitting on the edge of the bed, her face obscured by shadows. Her eyes, though, burned like hot coals. "You shouldn't sleep so soundly, Mark," she rasped, her voice a guttural growl that was definitely not his wife's. "There are things in the dark, things that want to play." He ripped her hand away, adrenaline surging through him. "Sarah, what's wrong?" Her face twisted into a grotesque parody of a smile. "Sarah is busy. I am using her for a little while." Mark scrambled out of bed, grabbing his phone, but before he could dial 911, Sarah was upon him, her strength unnatural, inhuman. She pinned him to the mattress, her cold breath ghosting across his face. "Don't call them," the voice snarled. "They can't help you. Only I can decide when I'm finished." Then, as quickly as it had started, the darkness receded. Sarah blinked, her eyes filled with confusion and a hint of lingering fear. "Mark? What happened? Why are you looking at me like that?" Mark, shaken to his core, knew he couldn't ignore it any longer. His wife, his Sarah, was being possessed. Chapter 2: Descent into Horror. The following days were a living nightmare. The entity controlling Sarah grew bolder, more brazen. It spoke through her, taunting Mark, twisting his fears into terrifying realities. It manipulated the children, whispering insidious suggestions into their ears, turning them against him. One afternoon, Emily came to Mark, her eyes wide with a disturbing innocence. "Mommy says you don't love us anymore, Daddy. She says you're going to leave us." Mark knelt, his heart breaking. "That's not true, Emily. I love you and Thomas more than anything." But the damage was done. The entity was driving a wedge between him and his family, isolating him, making him vulnerable. He tried everything: doctors, therapists, even online forums dedicated to paranormal phenomena. But nothing worked. The entity was too clever, too strong. One evening, he found Sarah levitating above the bed, her body contorted, her eyes rolled back in her head. The room vibrated with a low, resonant hum. "Leave her alone!" Mark screamed, his voice hoarse with terror. The entity laughed, a chilling, echoing sound that seemed to come from the very walls. "She's mine now, Peterson, and soon so will your children be." Desperate, Mark turned to the only place he could think of, the church. Chapter 3: Hope in the Face of Darkness. He found Father Michael, a kind-faced man with eyes that held a quiet strength. Mark poured out his story, his voice trembling with fear and exhaustion. Father Michael listened patiently, his expression grave. Possession is a rare but real evil, Mark. We must fight it with faith and prayer. He agreed to come to the Peterson home and perform an exorcism. That night, Father Michael, Mark, and a trembling Sarah stood in the living room. Emily and Thomas were tucked safely in their beds. The air was thick with tension. Father Michael began to recite prayers in Latin, his voice resonating with power. The entity within Sarah raged, her body convulsed, her voice transformed into a demonic snarl. Furniture overturned, windows rattled, and the room grew unbearably cold. "You have no power here," the entity shrieked. "This is my domain now." Father Michael held firm, his eyes fixed on Sarah's possessed form. He continued to pray, his voice unwavering. Mark joined in, his own prayers rising from the depths of his soul. The battle raged for hours. Mark watched, helpless and terrified, as his wife writhed and screamed, her body caught in a tug-of-war between good and evil. Finally, as dawn began to break, the entity weakened. Its grip on Sarah began to loosen. Her body gradually relaxed, and the demonic voice faded into a whimper. Father Michael raised his crucifix. "In the name of God, I command you to leave this vessel. Return to the abyss from whence you came." With a final, agonizing scream, the entity was gone. Sarah collapsed into Mark's arms, unconscious but free. Chapter 4. A New Dawn. Sarah slowly recovered, remembering only fragmented pieces of the horror she had endured. The family, scarred but united, began the long process of healing. They moved to a new house, a fresh start, a place where the shadows of the past couldn't reach them. Mark never forgot the terror they had faced, but he also never forgot the power of faith and love. The experience left them with a profound understanding of the darkness that lurks in the world, but also with an unshakable belief in the light that can overcome it. The shadow in Sarah's smile was gone, replaced by the genuine warmth and love that had always defined her. And for that, Mark was eternally grateful.